This is Energy Perspectives, a weekly podcast produced in Guyana that delves into the developments unfolding in the world's fastest growing economy.
Welcome to this episode of the Energy Perspectives podcast. I'm your hostess, Annastacya Phillips, and at this time we are joined by representatives of the Guyana Youth Entrepreneurship Chamber. First, we'll be speaking with the Senior Vice President, Ms. Julianna Lopes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. After that, we'll be joined by the head of the public relations arm within the organization, Mr. Shaquawn Gill. So, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, and we are happy to have you too.
Thank you.
So let's delve straight into some questions we have to better understand the organization, GYEC,
Yes.
as well as the business landscape from a youth perspective. So, for those who may not be familiar, what is the Guyana Youth Entrepreneurship Chamber and what gap was it created to fill in Ghana's business ecosystem?
The Guyana Youth Entrepreneurship Chamber was launched at the recently concluded Energy Expo. We actually would have launched that during the Youth Forum. Our chairman, Rosh Khan, would have introduced the members of the executive, and he shared a lot about our mission in terms of what we aim to accomplish, not only for this year, but also for the organization in itself. We are a business support organization, very similar to other chambers, such as the Georgian Chamber of Commerce, American Chamber of Commerce, etc. However, what we are going to do with our chamber is we are going to be addressing a lot of the limitations, opportunities, and avenues that young entrepreneurs can take in Ghana's business landscape. That is the entire goal of the GYEC.
I'm glad you highlighted that part. So, with Guyana's economy rapidly expanding, how are young entrepreneurs being meaningfully positioned to participate in this growth, or do you think they're still operating from the margins?
I think that's a very layered question because it really depends on the entrepreneur themselves and also the circumstances to them being an entrepreneur. A lot of people start businesses for a variety of reasons, some of which they started because they need to start a business to have a second income, while others do it because they have that passion and they recognize that there's a need in the market for a certain product or service that they can provide based on their experience or from what they would have seen looking at social media or other coverages online. In terms of the question though, I would say that I think that the limitations are based on personal perspectives. So for example, when it comes to registering your business, a lot of people may not recognize that there is the deeds and commercial registry. A lot of people think that they can just start their business, post it on social media, and then they have a business. And because of this, many entrepreneurs actually don't recognize that you need to have certain documentation to get your business afloat, to keep it in compliance with the different government agencies, but also to help you to potentially get financing if that is something you want to do to expand your business further. So that limitation, I would say it varies from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, and also unfortunately it varies depending on where they're from in Guyana. Georgetown, it has many of the government services centralized. However, I will commend the Ministry of Public Service because they've been doing a lot of work to ensure that there are at least one center in each region so that entrepreneurs and citizens alike can access essential services. So the government of Guyana is addressing these valuable concerns, and every day we've been seeing that the different agencies are releasing more information to address these.
Yes, thank you, Juliana. So I noticed that you alluded to some of the structural barriers, but I'd like you to expound on some others that are preventing young entrepreneurs from moving beyond small businesses to scalable, competitive enterprises.
I would say the biggest barrier is the one that everyone loves to talk about, finance. In order to make money, you need to have money. However, a lot of the times when young people start business, as I mentioned, it starts on social media. That's the most cost-effective way. You can create a TikTok account, a Facebook page, and you can just post your logo, post your products, and that's it. But if you want to scale your business from just being known and marketed on social media, you need to have money to do so. Now, for young entrepreneurs, there are several ways by which they do that. the most common Guyanese way is, you know, you ask a friend, you ask a family member for a little small piece, but then that can only carry you a certain way. So in terms of scaling your business, that's where you look to get a loan from a commercial bank. However, as I mentioned, some young people, they may not have all of the documentation required, or they may not be filing their statements on time or keeping an accurate accounting measures. So in terms of that now, I would say that the financing, while it is the biggest barrier, I think with the Guyana Development Bank, that's also helping entrepreneurs because you can get up to $3 million, zero interest, zero collateral. So that's an example of, as I mentioned, with the government of Guyana, they've recognized that a lot of businesses in Guyana, many of them can't expand because they don't have the finances. And a lot of the times too, innovative ideas are often limited to just ideas. Not many of them have the action to instill that idea. And in order to do so, you need finance. So I would say that, to me, I think is the biggest barrier.
Indeed. So access to finance, as you mentioned, is often highlighted. But beyond funding, what does Guyana's entrepreneurship ecosystem still lack?
I would say the biggest thing that our entrepreneurial system lacks is definitely a lack of accountability with documentation. I think we put a lot of effort in starting a business and not recognizing that once you have your business, you need to make sure that you're compliant. You need to be NIS compliant. You need to file your individual income tax returns. You need to ensure that with your documentation, if you have workers, that you have them file for NIS and all these different things. Documentation, I think, is the biggest thing that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially young people, may not recognize. This isn't to say that there are Guyanese young entrepreneurs that aren't doing that, but it's just saying that structurally, I think that that's the biggest issue. From my experience of speaking with entrepreneurs, many of them do not even have a business plan or a marketing plan, and they take it day by day for their operations, and that isn't sustainable. It will not make you scale in terms of having that vision. So you need to have something written on paper that would enable you to accomplish your goals, whether they're short-term goals or long-term goals. I would say the documentation is the biggest thing.
Very insightful conversation thus far, Ms. Lopes. Now, my last question for you is, how can youth-led businesses build the governance, compliance, financial discipline, and long-term strategy needed to compete successfully or seriously?
For me, I love social media, and I see a lot of young enterprises on, as I mentioned, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Many of these social media platforms are enabling these young people to share their business for free. This is, of course, without sponsoring any of the posts that you would see online. But through opening the conversations, that's enabling one way of shaping the ecosystem of Guyana in terms of governance. Because a lot of the times when you think about how a policy is shaped, it's shaped from public perspective, it's shaped from conversations, and conversations then lead to action. So I would say from the social media, it's having that positive influence for entrepreneurs to then share what they do. And even with the chamber itself, the Guyana Youth Entrepreneurship Chamber, our executive chairman, Denon Lewis, he speaks a lot with all the entrepreneurs that are in the chamber. And through those conversations, he would have recognized that many of them have innovative ideas. It's just that we need a lot of leadership, and that's where the chamber comes in, because our chamber is so full and of bright, talented intellectuals who are so passionate about their businesses. And many of the businesses in the chamber are not just those traditional types of businesses, but also like agro-processing, drone technology, etc. And I think this is where, from having these conversations and being in the room with these people and networking with them, that's how we can shape our governance and other things that you would have listed within your question.
All right, thank you for that, Ms. Lopes. We will now invite Mr. Shaquawn Gill, who is the head of the Public Relations Department of GYEC, to join us now. Mr. Gill, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Annastacya. I'm really happy to be here and to represent the GYEC here today.
Perfect. So I've got some questions for you, starting off with major opportunities emerging from oil and gas, services, agriculture, technology, logistics, and manufacturing. How can young entrepreneurs position themselves to access these opportunities?
So one of the first things I want to emphasize or reiterate, because I know our senior vice president pointed this out in our conversation with you a few moments ago. Documentation and the importance of documentation cannot be overemphasized. We live in a largely informal, or a large portion of our economy is still informal, and young people may have the idea that they could wake up a morning, and decide that they're going to start this business, and they do it informally but expect growth. And sometimes growth first comes through properly making or properly formalizing your setup. And so that's one of the first things that I want to highlight, that if you want your business to grow, you want your business to blossom, you want to play a real role in the economy, you have to understand the importance of documentation. And thankfully, in this day and age, it's not as hard as it may have been many moons ago, because a lot of our processes have been digitized, and hopefully we can see GRA compliance application, NIS compliance application moving a little bit away from the paper-based setup towards a more digital mechanism. But it's a very, very simple process to get done, and so those things are very easy to do. And in this day and age, we also have businesses that will help you get it done. So we're in a place now where you don't have many excuses. If you can't, you're able, or you feel like you've got too much going on, you can't get to go to NIS, you can't go to GRA, you can't spend that time waiting in a line. There are businesses that are willing, ready, and able in our chamber too, that will support you in that endeavor. And I think it's extremely easy. The second thing that I want to point out, and I can use Julianna as an example. I knew Julianna before I ever knew Julianna, and that's because she made an intentional effort to use what was available to her through social media and the like. And of course, I may have a little soft spot for the media and digital media, but using those mechanisms to make sure she can promote what she does, and not just in the way where it's generic, or it's just this random thing, but a consistent use of social media, an intentional use, but also a creative one too. People are looking at your business and looking at your product not through direct marketing or direct advertising, but being able to find those little ways to share your ideas, your products, your initiatives, your innovative ideas with them. And so Julianna is a perfect example of somebody who has done that. We've seen it happen in many other respects as well. So I would identify those two things mainly as recommendations for our young people. And I would also say that we have to be prepared. I think the next wave of development will not necessarily benefit primarily those who are talented. It will more so benefit the people who are prepared. And if you want to benefit from that system, and you want to be able to grow and see your business thrive, then preparation is what is key.
Indeed. Yeah. Coming out of your response, I heard about 3 things that young entrepreneurs can do to be successful in our landscape today. And those are identifying the appropriate processes to get started with your business, of course, utilizing all of the resources available to you, and maintaining a branding that really speaks positively about what you do and what you offer. Yeah. In addition to that, is there anything else you think that youth-led businesses can avoid to prevent being concentrated at the lower end of the value chain? And what can they do instead to become serious partners, suppliers, and innovators?
The first thing I would identify as a step that can be taken is partnership.
Okay.
I think it's undervalued, but I know that President Ali and many other stakeholders, including other chambers and stuff, they have been pushing the idea of consortiums, pushing the idea of getting people together with the similar ideas and using that capital, that experience, that expertise to one big venture. And I think that can help. I can use my own example. I have my own business that I run, which is school transportation. And I have never been, that's an equipment rental, so I have never been a hands-on type of person. Like, you ain't gonna see me changing no brake pads and going and change no oil and them kind of thing. But I had the idea, and it was something that I felt was a gap in the market that needed to be fixed in my area. And so there's a friend of mine who we went to school and all of that stuff. I think you went to Jonah, did you?
No,
at some point? Oh, I thought you did. Right? So a friend of mine who I've known for some time, he was in the tech stream and stuff like that. And so I know he's very hands-on. He could change a light, by the time you blink the light change, he's that type of person. And so we have been able to use my idea and skills of the network and promoting and selling, and of course his expertise in more of the technical areas for our business to thrive. And thankfully we have for a year now been operating that school transportation service. We've been doing the equipment rental in the form of cement mixers and stuff like that, and we've been able to maximize. And so my point is, that is what you want to do. Apart from coming together in a big way, it's also find the people that can add value to what you're doing, and that helps your business to really take a step forward. But in the area of accessing greater opportunities, larger opportunities, I think government has made it extraordinarily simple for young people to be able to access, because and we're going to talk specifically about the development bank shortly, but when you look at how government has reoriented the procurement space, and now projects like emergency drainage works and pavements and concrete roads that were originally set aside for large businesses, large contractors to get done, you have a situation now where the small people who have positioned themselves, who have gotten their documentation in place, who put themselves in the right spaces, they are now able to benefit. I've heard the Vice President and others say that there are more than 12,000 people that have applied for those opportunities. And so those things I think are very, very critical for us to do and for us to get involved in, because that is how we're able to really make that change. The other thing that I'd want to point out is that we have to move as young people from a place where we're just selling a product or we're just selling a service, but we're fixing a problem.
Noted.
And when we have that perspective shift, a lot of things can change and open up for us. When there is a perspective shift in the fact that how am I contributing to my country? How am I contributing to the economy? How can I do that? And what is needed in the economy for that to happen? I think answering that question better equips our young people to get into the bigger spaces and to use their skills and their talents and their preparation to support the development, whether that's of the oil and gas sector, but also the supporting industries that surround it as well. Because a lot of the opportunities aren't centralized now in the oil and gas sector. They are spread out across those sectors that support. In agriculture, in transportation, as I pointed out, and in a number of other areas. So it's positioning yourself in that regard.
Well said, Mr. Gill. Now, moving on to a pertinent question here. What role should GYEC play in influencing policy discussions around SME development, procurement access, local content, and youth participation in the private sector?
So the Guyana Youth Entrepreneurship Chamber was set up with a primary goal. And that goal was to be the collective and a united voice for young entrepreneurs across our country. And the value of having that voice in a space where it was there, but through the mechanism of bigger organizations like the GCCI and the PSC, having a specific organization that raises the ideas, the issues, the challenges that young entrepreneurs face has been the goal from day one. And so the GYEC has been and will continue to be that united voice that raises the issues on behalf of our young entrepreneurs, and also to encourage them to do what's necessary for them to do better. But in addition to that, the GYEC has to also collaborate and engage government. To say to government, for example, the Local Content Act has been in operation for maybe 3-4 years now, since 2022, I think, or 2021. And there are 40 areas that are carved out in that act. The GYEC and other organizations now have to ask the question, are we at a place where we can move from 40 to 45? Are we at a place where now we can move some of those services that are at 90%, 70%, and move them to 100% being provided by Guyanese businesses? Because that means that there is a greater pool, and it means that young entrepreneurs can better benefit from what's happening in that area. It is for the GYEC to say, if you have, in the same way government has, by law and by policy, carved out a specific amount of projects or contracts for small businesses, are we at the point where we can now say businesses owned by people 35 years and older are entitled to receiving 20% of contracts in a fiscal year? Are we at that place? And those are the conversations that the GYEC and young people have to start and have to continue to have. It is for the GYEC to say that we are at a place in our country's economy where we can establish a development bank that provides $3 million interest-free, collateral-free to all people, to all, particularly young people and women and vulnerable groups, but young people especially. We have to be the organization when this rolls out to say, this thing is working exceptionally well and young entrepreneurs are benefiting immensely from it. And we are also the organization that has to say, we believe there are some fine tweaking that can be done to the legislation or to the procedural aspects of the operation of the bank that will better ensure that our young people are functioning, that our young people are benefiting from the policy initiative of government. And so that is the important component for us. We have to also be, Annastacya, the organization that says to the private sector that you are, and when I say private sector, I mean multinational companies that have set up shop, hotels, and the oil and gas companies and so on. You are receiving services from Guyanese, and you have been doing that for quite some time. Why can it not be in your business policy framework to ensure that 20% of all the procurement opportunities that you provide are going to be directly given to youth-led and youth-owned businesses? And we have to be able to chart that course. And so you will see that happen, and you will see the GYEC, of course, under the leadership of our President Rosh Khan and our Executive Director Denon Lewis and the entire management committee. You will see that push continue to happen. What you will also see, if I can also add this, is that you'll see the GYEC supporting young businesses immensely.
Okay.
In helping them to understand why documentation is important, helping them to understand those who have never done a business plan at any point ever in their lives, but want to access the development bank, to show them what it looks like, to show them how it's done, to show them how they can refine their ideas. And that is the role of the GYEC. And I think that role will continue to be played so that the young people's voice, as I started off, can be amplified through what we're doing at the chamber.
Thank you. Based on
that was a little long, but sorry. My bad.
Based on your insight there, I can tell that the Guyana Youth Entrepreneurship Chamber has a very important role to play in Guyana's business landscape. Now, how can established private sector bodies, and I think you mentioned that in your response, but expound a bit more. How can established private sector bodies, government, and larger companies create more meaningful pathways for young entrepreneurs to grow?
So I pointed out one, which is the breaking up of larger contracts. This is for the government arm particularly, into smaller, more accessible opportunities for young people. I have to say that government has been doing that over the years, and I think it has matriculated into what we're seeing today, which is through the registration, the digital registration that small businesses had to do. So that is well underway. The other important component is the Guyana Development Bank. And making sure that that is accessible to people all across the country. I recognize, as I'm sure other members of the chamber recognize, that this may be, it may not be as easy to do in every region as soon as it starts, but to ensure that in the medium term, that regions 2, regions 7, region 9, region 1, the outlying regions can benefit similarly from the opportunities presented by the development bank as would the people in region 4. And so I think that is an important consideration for government to make in outlining the Guyana Development Bank. But what it is and the potential that it has is almost inexplicable, because the type of opportunities that will be provided for young businesses and young entrepreneurially minded people is greater now than it has ever been. You listen to the Attorney General, who has responsibility for the Deeds and Commercial Registry, talk about the thousands upon tens of thousands of businesses that have been registered over the last 5 years. And there is a reason for that. It's not because people ain't got nothing to do. It's because people recognize that there are opportunities available for them and opportunities for them to do well. You look at what the private sector is doing. Oil and gas companies, hotels and stuff like that. And how they have been able to create this supply chain effect where young people can now start farms and sell their produce to hotels. So even if they don't sell their produce to hotels, whoever is supplying the hotels, they have, because they are now supplying the hotels, their supply is no longer going to the original people, or as much of it is not going to the original people. But somebody still has to supply those original people, whether it was the vendors on the market or whoever else needed their supply. And so there remains a gap there. And so it is for those conversations to happen with our young people, for them to see these opportunities, and for government to continue to create the spaces that are necessary for that type of growth to happen. We spoke about the development bank. The Local Content Act, I pointed out, has been in existence for some time, and I think we have reached to the point where we may have plateaued, in the sense that the Guyanese businesses have shown that they can do much more than what is outlined or enshrined in that legislation, and it's now time for us to expand the scope, and that will mean, as I said, more opportunities for our young people. And those are areas that I think we can strongly consider to make sure that our young people are benefiting in an extremely significant way. One of the other things that I wanted to point out to here, for government and for private sector and for chambers like GYEC, GCCI and so on, and I think the GCCI has started this initiative, is to create mentorship programs for our young people. And I don't profess to be a business expert. Maybe Julianna might more so be a business expert than I am. But I know that there are several areas of business that I do not yet understand, that somebody who's been in business 20, 15 years, 25 years understands extremely clearly. And it's not that type of thing that you can necessarily get from a book, but it's something that you get from practical experience, from learning from somebody. And so creating those mentorship areas, and I think the president spoke about the fact that this should be embedded in the development bank structure, so that young people can get the information that they need to better expand their businesses, but to better structure their businesses as well, so that they can see maximum profitability.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty strong pathway for young entrepreneurs to grow. Now, as we prepare to close, let me ask you, if GYC succeeds over the next 5 years, what measurable changes should we see in Guyana's business landscape?
So, the GYEC has to be, and I am confident that it will be, more than a talk shop, more than a GAF session. We have to go past GAF sessions. We have to we have to get to the place where we are delivering information and content to people that is enough to change their lives. There's a popular saying that I think maybe all of us in this room know, that you can give a man a fish today, and he'll come back to you tomorrow and he can ask for a fish. The next day he might ask for beef. The next day he might ask for chicken. All of that is not in the saying. I just put it in, right? But you can teach a man to fish. If you teach a man to fish, he will have a skill that will take him through the rest of his life. And so over the next few years, I believe that the GYEC's intention and vision is to teach people how to fish in an economy that is ripe with fish, if that makes sense.
It does.
Right? In an economy where people can thrive and people can grow and people can live comfortable lives, the GYEC has to be that organization that gives them the scope to be able to grow and gives them the tools necessary to be able to grow. One of the other things that I think is important for us is, while business startups are good, those numbers are good. To see that people have that type of confidence in the economy where they're developing and starting their own businesses is good. The question we have to now ask ourselves over the next few years is, how many of those businesses survive? How many of those businesses are thriving? And so it will be an important measurement to track, I think, in the GYEC too, on how we are able to, the businesses that come to us, that we are working with, how we see in years to come, how they are growing, how they're thriving, and how they're succeeding, and the role that the GYEC is playing and continues to play in seeing them become all that they want to be, so that they can move out of SMEs and they can be the next big businesses. In the next few years, we're not going to be talking about the economy that we have and all of that. What we want to be talking about is the entrepreneurs that have driven this economy to where it's going to be, and that business mindset that I think we now need to have. You see, and I think a great example is one of the founding members, Matthew Gill, and the work that he's been doing with economy. This year's theme was swim differently. Yeah. And so we have to, and to borrow his phrase, we have to create the avenues and the training shops and workshops and programs so that people can learn how to swim differently. How to swim, first of all, and then how to swim differently, so they separate themselves from the pack, and to do so in a tangible way. The economy program, I think one of the years gave people, I think, $1 million in startup finance to make sure that they can start their businesses. And that is an example of what the GYEC wants to see happen for our young people, so that the argument of access to finance will no longer be a conversation we're having. The only conversation we will be asking ourselves is whether or not we're prepared to take advantage of the opportunities presented to us.
That's quite the result-driven outlook there for the Guyana Youth Entrepreneurship Chamber. And I want to thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Gill. And of course, thanks to Ms. Julianna Lopes, who's also serving as the Senior Vice President of the GYEC. Yeah. This has been the Energy Perspectives podcast. My name is Annastacya. Do catch us next time.
Thank you for listening to the Guyana Energy Perspectives podcast. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.